into the neck work, so I was trying to get all of my documents up to date. But first item of business is always request for bill introductions. Do we have any requests? If not, I have two on behalf of Representative Rivas. The first is RS 0579. This is a sales tax exemption for Sleep in Heavenly Peace. I think this is the same bill that Representative Epley has brought in years past, but I'm not sure if I can take any questions, but are there any questions, committee? Okay, without objection, the request is approved. And the next request is also on behalf of Representative Rivas. It's RS 0725, and this is the ability to have Kansas income tax waived when eminent domain is used for acquisition of property. Again, I'm not sure I can answer any questions. This is similar to the bill that Representative Epley had brought in years prior. But if there are no questions, without objection, the request is approved. Are there any other requests for bill introductions? Seeing none, we will move on to our first hearing. Oh, yes, Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a inquiry. Who is paying the penalty today?
Pardon?
Who is paying the penalty today?
Oh, does Representative Averkamp want to?
Oh, okay. So I need. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
appreciate
Chairman.
the goodies. I wasn't even aware a cell phone had went off, but appreciate that. Okay, now that everybody has their snacks, we should be able to proceed. Our first hearing of the day is House Bill 2013, and I will turn first to the revisor's office for an overview, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2013 would discontinue from sales tax from being imposed on cable, community, antenna, and television services. Currently, sales tax is imposed on certain services under the imposition statute, KSA 79-3603. And currently under subsection K, there is sales tax imposed on cable, community, and antenna television services. As you can see from the bill, these are stricken out, so there will no longer be sales tax imposed on these services. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you. Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So how does the discontinuing the imposition of a sales tax differ from a sales tax exemption?
Mr. Siebert.
It's a very good question. Usually, we're all familiar with sales tax exemptions. That's based on the fact that sales tax is imposed on the sale of tangible goods. Since these are services, defined as services, sales tax is specifically levied against certain services. Usually sales tax, like goods, sales tax is applied unless the exemption applies. Here, sales tax is specifically levied on these services, so instead of providing an exemption, these provisions are stricken from being a sales tax is being imposed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It's almost quite literally 6 of one or half a dozen of the other. So, committee, any further questions for the revisor? See none. Thank you for that summary, Adam. Next, we would turn to Department of Revenue for an overview on the fiscal note.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Kathleen Smith with the Department of Revenue. Department of Revenue is estimating that House Bill 2013 would reduce state revenues by $84 million in fiscal year 2026. Of that amount, the state general fund revenues would be decreased by around $68.9 million, and the state highway fund $15.1 million. In fiscal year 27, the impact would increase to 92.6, and in fiscal year 28, 93.4. To come up with our estimates, what we did is we reviewed data from actual sales tax collections from the cable and subscription television services. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for questions.
Thank you, and I apologize. I don't have that fiscal note in front of me. I'm trying to get my computer to work. Did you have, you said that included the cable services and the streaming services. Are those split out, or do you just have them aggregate total? Do
We
you
went
know?
with NAICS. We went with specific NAICS codes that are listed, and I
Okay.
could give you those NAICS if you would like to, if you would like those.
Well, I was curious if we had the ability to look at each one. Oh, thank you. If we had questions about how much each,
Each NAICS code, we could split that out as long as there were more than 4 filers within that NAICS code, yes.
if you could provide that, that would be very beneficial, I
Okay.
believe. Thank you. Committee, are there any questions on the fiscal note? Seeing none, thank you, Kathleen. Our first conferee as a proponent would like to welcome Dayton Murdy with Charter Communications. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. Again, my name is Dayton Murdy. I'm the Senior Manager of Government Affairs for Charter Communications. Charter operates in Kansas under the brand name Spectrum, and we provide cable video, broadband, voice, and mobile services to about 118,000 Kansans. We're doing business in about 25 communities, and we employ over 850 Kansans. Last year, we invested over $37 million to expand broadband and our other services to an additional 3,000 homes and small businesses in the state. And we are here today to testify in support of HB 2013. Currently, our cable video services do have a sales tax levied against them, but streaming services do not. As technology has advanced, we see a lot more customers going over to streaming services like YouTube TV, Fubo, and our competitors have a competitive advantage since they're not having a sales tax on their services. So this would level that playing field, and for that reason, we support the bill. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We will go ahead and take questions at this time, committee. Any questions? Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for being here, Dayton. You've had a chance to look over the fiscal note, I expect.
Yes, sir.
I was personally somewhat a little shocked by seeing it. Would you care to comment on the fiscal note?
Yeah, it seemed significantly higher than our expectations considering our market share. Also, it increased year over year while we see the number of traditional cable customers declining each year by extremely high rates as people turn towards services like streaming services, which are not taxed. So I think that we'd be certainly interested to work with the chairman and the Department of Revenue to figure out why it is so high and if there's anything that we can do to maybe lessen that impact, like with what you all did with groceries, maybe stair-stepping it down over time or something like that.
Okay, thank you. I was just a little shocked.
Thank you. To follow up along that, do you have you done any analysis on what it would impact Charter Communications? Do you know what that sales tax would mean to your company?
Yeah, so it would save our customers about $5.1 million.
Committee, any further questions? Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to clarify a bit, you talk about this tax is not charged to your competitors. So Spectrum owns the physical connection to the home. Is that fair? Like AT&T may run fiber optic, or you guys may run a cable to the house?
Yes, sir.
And the things that come through that physical connection are Disney Plus and Netflix. Are you talking about those folks don't pay sales tax, the Netflixes and the Disneys, or Could you frame that up for me a little bit in terms of your competition? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we consider streaming services like YouTube TV as direct competitors to our video services. We are the connection and own the lines that the internet runs over. But we also pay other taxes that streaming services don't pay. So our video has a 6.5% sales tax, but we also pay local sales tax where it's applicable. We pay community improvement district sales taxes where it's applicable, and we pay franchise fees. So our total tax burden for our customers in the state of Kansas can get up to over 17% in some areas of the state. And streaming services that are direct competitors don't pay any of those.
But all of those streaming services have to have a way to get into the home, and that's through some physical line, whether it's fiber optic or cable, whatever it is, right? And so your competitors are those that own those lines into the homes in that aspect. Is that fair?
No, so DirecTV, I'm sorry, not DirecTV, but YouTube TV doesn't own the traditional cable that the internet runs over. That we own that infrastructure.
Okay, so in terms of content, they're competing with you, but to get into the home, you're the only way in. They come through your line to get into the home.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and I'll admit, we have a YouTube TV subscription at my house, and we have Starlink. I mean, it's Wi-Fi. We have no cable connection out in my area, and it's all through the wireless provider at that point. I don't know. Any further questions, committee? Yes, Representative Wolf.
Thank you, Chair. So this may not be for you, but why are those others not taxed? When that was all set up, do we know?
I think the best answer, and I might look at the revisor for a better answer than this, but those digital services, like we had to pass the marketplace facilitator law because the statutes that we had just didn't cover goods that were sold, digital services, things like that. It was mostly tangible goods that were taxable. Not all services are taxable, so it just...
Cell phones taxed? Yes.
I believe
They're
cell
similar.
phones.
I mean, they're using the same,
Yeah.
so before I want to give up all that money, maybe I want to tax something else.
Yes, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to get myself in trouble here. I'm kind of going along with Representative. I thought it was a great question. Our revenues are down. We're asking everybody to take a cut. And I think we ought to look at taxing the ones that are not taxed, other than cutting your tax. What are your thoughts on that?
Representative, we want a fair market place to compete in. I think the issue of taxing services, streaming services, has been brought up in the state of Kansas before, and so we brought it this way to bring us parity. What our company cares about is being treated like our competitors in a fair playing field.
See no further questions. Oh, yes, Representative Turner. Oh, Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. I think you've got a good system going there. If your competitor's kind of not paying it, I don't see any reason we should hop on you and hit you. I mean, there's hard to find anything in this state that's not taxed twice. So, good luck.
Thank you.
All right, see no further questions. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Committee, that is the only proponent I show as a in person. Is there anyone else wishing to testify in person as a proponent? If not, I'll direct the committee's attention to the written only testimony that was submitted. We do have written only neutral testimony. Is there anyone wishing to appear before the committee as a neutral conferee? Seeing none, we will move on to the opponent testimony and welcome first to committee Mike Taylor with the Kansas County Commissioners.
Good afternoon, committee. I'm here representing the Kansas County Commissioners Association. That is 360-plus elected local officials in all 105 counties. We are Republican, Democrat, rural, urban, so it's a very bipartisan mix of local officials. We're opposing this bill as currently written, and quite honestly, we don't really care if you want to give away the state sales tax on cable TV or any other kind of service or product. That's really not our business. That's your business as legislators. The concern that we have is every time you do that, you also preempt locally voter-approved sales taxes in communities all over the state. And that's costing us a lot of money. If you look back, current list of sales tax exemptions now goes from the letter A to quadruple X. And if bills that we've seen already in this session are passed, we'll be into the alphabet 5 times over. That's a lot of money. And again, if you want to give that 6.5% away, that's fine. That's not our business. But every time you do that, it ends the tax for a voter-approved community center or sidewalks or streets or public safety. So our solution to that is, if you would, on these sales tax exemptions, treat it like you did the grocery sales tax. And to stay in compliance with Streamline, what you could do is say, all right, on cable TV, the state sales tax on that is 0%. That leaves the local alone, and then local communities would still get their money at the local level. The state, you could eliminate that state sales tax, and all you have to do is just set the rate at 0, and you've exempted it at the state level, but you've not taken those millions and millions of dollars away from local communities that are using that money to pay for all kinds of local services that those local voters have approved. So that's my objection, that's my solution, and I'll stand for questions.
Committee, are there any questions? We have the paper crowd over there with their sun visors today. See no questions, thank you for your testimony. Next, I'd like to welcome Spencer Duncan with the League of Kansas Municipalities.
Thank you, Chair. I am Government Affairs Director for the League of Kansas Municipalities, representing the cities of Kansas. When we look at tax policy, we have a very simple ideal, right? Eventually, what we all want to get to is a system where a lot of people are paying a little, but we continue to make tax policy that has a few people paying a lot. And that is not what I know the state wants to do, and it's certainly not what the cities want to do. And as I look at this bill, my first question, a few things I want you to consider today. And the first is, I don't know what threshold that these groups meet to warrant a sales tax exemption. Traditionally, we have reserved sales tax exemptions for nonprofits, government entities, or even organizations that are doing some societal good. And when we've even done it for for-profit companies, we've had a purpose. So for instance, we didn't like it, but last year you gave telecommunications company new construction sales tax exemption, about $17 million hit to the bottom line. But the rationale behind that is the pledge from them was they are going to take those savings and put them back into the system to help us continue build-outs in underserved communities. So that exemption, although for a for-profit entity, had a purpose. This sales tax exemption doesn't have a purpose except what we all strive for, which is, I don't want to pay taxes, you don't want to pay taxes, nobody wants to pay taxes, right? So for that, nice try is our approach, but what threshold is it meeting? The second point is, the last study we can find on sales tax erosion and exemptions provided by this legislature was 2006, done by Wichita State, and we're actually going to see if we can get it updated. But 20 years ago almost, it was estimated that these exemptions equate to about $500 million that is no longer coming into the economy of Kansas because of these exemptions. And at that point, the exemption list was about 50 or less. Today, it's 102 or so or more of categories, and I can only imagine what that $500 million has grown into. Every time you do a sales tax exemption, with respect, you can't then wonder why we are having issues with the property tax side of it. Those revenues have to come from somewhere as expenses go up. So as that proverbial three-legged stool that we all talk about happens and we keep hacking away at one leg, it makes those other legs have to do a lot more work. So any sales tax exemption that comes before you, whether it's this one or others, I know you're going to have, just take that into consideration as to what the impact is going to be on the whole tax system, as opposed to just, oh, it's a sales tax exemption. And the third thing is, I'm not going to repeat it all, but we have now advocated for several years for what Mr. Taylor said. I always say this, you're going to hear me say a lot, you've got your sandbox, we've got ours. You are elected to decide what you want to do with those sales tax levies at the state level. Make it a zero rate if you want to get rid of that 6.5% and press on those savings. Let the voters in the local levels decide what those rates should be as currently as under the system. So with that, that is all I have, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, are there any questions? Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment. I checked my cell phone bill, and I pay sales tax on my cell phone bill. And I've always struggled with the philosophical thing that I can go to Barnes & Noble and I have to pay sales tax, but I get the book on a Kindle and I don't. But what I did want to ask the reviser is the bill as it's drafted, does it negate the local sales tax, or is it only the state sales tax?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since it picks up, the locals pick up the state imposition statute, so it would flow through and impact the local sales tax authority. The answer is yes, it would impact locals.
Representative Clayton.
I apologize, Mr. Chair. My questions have questions here, and I apologize to the conferee here. So my question really is, as I'm looking over the explanation and reviser of statutes, this might be, more to the reviser. So the way that I see this is that it doesn't read as a sales tax exemption. It's discontinuing sales tax that are being imposed. But here's the real question. Community antenna, I know that some people, that is how they get their local TV. Like, for instance, that's how I get my local news. Could you explain a little bit more about how that would look and how that's defined, and if I'm even correct on that? Sorry. But I'm on this committee. You'd have to deal with it.
Okay. Mr. Siebers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, that's just how it's phrased in the statute. It's cable, community antenna, and other television services. Those are the terms that are stricken. How they're defined, I'd probably need to defer to the KDOR if possible.
Yeah, we might have to get some clarification on that. I think that's a good question. Okay. Representative Corbett.
The question I have for you, would the companies that we were talking about before, do they pay franchise fees? The one we were talking to
like YouTube and Hulu and all of those.
So they pay a franchise
No,
fee?
I would love to have that conversation, but that is a Pandora's box that some do not want to open.
So on franchise fees, every town, every place this cable goes, you tax them.
Yeah, they pay the franchise fee, yes. And those have gone considerably down in most communities over the last 5-10 years.
Give me an example.
Of a franchise fee? Yeah. So Cox pays the franchise fees because they're primarily directly associated with the use of the easements and the ability to do the work within those easements. So if you're not within an easement, if you don't have hardware, as it were, then you traditionally do not have to have a franchise fee because those are specifically for those property issues.
Thank you.
Yeah.
See no further questions.
I'll make one more comment to one of the questions just to clarify.
Certainly.
Concerns about staying within streamlined compliance are very real, and you should worry about that. But I promise you, too, we did look into that as we've proposed the zero rate to make sure we don't want to hamper the state's ability in our compact with those other 25 plus states or whatever it is, too. So as we've put this forward, we have taken the streamlined compliance issue very seriously to make sure that our idea is workable and not going to get the state of Kansas in trouble. So if it does, then you can yell at me later. But.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you for your
Thank you,
testimony. Is there anyone else wishing to appear as an opponent on House Bill 2013? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on this bill and open up the hearing on House Bill 2024. And again, I will turn to the reviser for a summary on that bill, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2024 would enact the Fighting Chance for Firefighters Act, which would provide an income tax credit for firefighters who incur unreimbursed medical expenses for screening for occupation-related cancer. Commencing in tax year 2025, a credit in an amount up to $250 would be provided for unreimbursed expenses incurred and paid by the firefighter for any medical procedures to detect cancer. The credit may be carried over for up to 5 taxable years, and the credit is non-refundable. For tax year 2025, the total amount of credit allowed would not exceed $1,500,000. And starting in tax year 2026 and each year thereafter, if the total credits authorized under the bill exceed $1,500,000 in a tax year, the Secretary of Revenue shall allow such credits, but shall factor in the excess over $1,500,000 into a percentage adjustment for subsequent tax years. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
I guess I have a question on that last part. Typically, once they hit the limit, could you explain that a little bit more so it would be kind of prorated if it went over the limit? Is that the way I read that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is kind of a novel process. I've never really seen this before, and I wasn't actually the one who drafted this bill. But as I understand it would work, the first year it would be set at $1,500,000, and assuming it went over $1,500,000, the recipients would still receive the credit. It's just for the next year they would reduce it, I believe, by the percentage. It's kind of a complicated formula included in this bill, but it's a mechanism, I believe, to allow individuals to take, especially in this first year, the full credit, but then provide Department of Revenue the ability to offset that in future tax years.
Okay, yeah, I'd never seen that before and was curious how that would work. Kind of interesting, might have to study that. Committee, are there any questions for the reviser? Yes, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Volunteer fire departments, would they be covered?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking at the definition of firefighter on page 1, line 20, as a public employee or a volunteer. So to my reading, a volunteer should be included.
I would assume they would turn in something upon request to Department of Revenue if they claimed the credit, if the department needed some verification. I don't have the bill right in front of me. I have my computer is up and running, but I didn't have that pulled up. I didn't know if there was anything that addressed auditing procedures or if that would just happen through the normal income tax auditing process.
Mr. Chair, I don't believe there is any specific provisions relating to, returning in receipts. It really just, if they have unreimbursed, mentions having unreimbursed medical expenses, or expenses, they could claim it on the return.
Okay. Guess we'd leave that up to the tax preparer then. Any further questions, committee? Seeing none, Mr. Siebers, thank you. We'll turn next to Department of Revenue for an overview on the fiscal note.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Kathleen Smith with the Department of Revenue. We have made the assumption that the maximum credit amount would be claimed each tax year, so that would be an impact of $1.5 million beginning in fiscal year 2026. And in looking, if people were to, these firefighters were to claim the max amount of $250, that would be approximately 6,000 individuals that would be able to take advantage of this tax credit.
And did you catch the language there that it kind of gets prorated if it exceeds that? Do you have any, obviously the fiscal note would still remain the same, but did the department have any concerns on how that percentage or prorated system would work?
I believe we've briefly looked at the language. I think it is a little bit convoluted, but we would try and do what the statute provides. It does also give us the ability, though, to do rules and regs for the specific tax credit. So if we need to, we could do that as well.
Okay, we might work with the department if it looks like we're going to take action on the bill, just to make sure there is clarification regarding that. Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that breakdown. I'm looking at the rest of the fiscal note. You guys assess, scroll down here a little bit, one new FTE position to answer questions from taxpayers. I assume the 72,181 is part of that in the total expenditures. A whole FTE to answer questions from the taxpayers. What formula do you guys use to come up with that? That seems a little pricey.
How can I say this? With each legislative session, different tax credits are added to the books, and we ask for additional help to process these returns, and we don't get it. So at this point, we've got probably maybe 40 different tax credits on the books. And so trying to process all of these tax credits, we're finding that we do need additional people to help with this assistance. And if we were to allow the $250, that's 6,000 returns that are going to come in with this tax credit. So I guess.
Well, yeah, because it just says here to answer questions from taxpayers. I didn't know how many FTEs we currently have that are answering questions from taxpayers, and that could be absorbed within the existing resources. But from what I think you're saying, you guys just do basically a blanket FTE request for pretty much any one of these?
Well, I don't want to say a blanket, but we have begun to ask for additional assistance because we're getting to the point that we need the extra people to go ahead and help process the different tax credits that we've got.
Okay, I got you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I think that's a good question, too. That's something always to be aware of. Sometimes we look at the SGF impact. We don't consider some of these programs that we implement and the burden that it places on not only the programming, but the staff to answer telephone calls and respond to emails and different questions like that as well. So, are there any further questions for Department of Revenue on the fiscal note? See none. Thank you, Kathleen. I'd like to open up the proponent section testimony and welcome first to committee Becky Tuttle. Welcome to committee.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chairman Smith and members of the committee for allowing me to be here today. Thank you for your service to the great state of Kansas, and happy Kansas Day. I am Becky Tuttle, and it is my privilege and honor to serve on Wichita City Council representing District 2, and I'm here to provide my support for House Bill 2024, the Fighting Chance for Firefighters Act. I have some friends with me here today. I'd like to recognize Wichita Fire Department Chief Tammy Snow, and I'd also like to represent the International Association of Firefighters Local 135 Wichita President Bush. And then if anyone else is here today, would you please stand so that you can show your support for House Bill 2024? We have the fire marshal, some other folks with us. Thank you. Thank you for being here today. Due to the growing concerns and the effects of cancer in Wichita firefighters, the Wichita Local IFF 135 began discussing the need for cancer screenings with Ascension via Christi. Because of those discussions, the Protecting Our Heroes initiative was formed with the local IFF, Wichita Fire Department, Ascension via Christi, with the mission to implement comprehensive cancer screenings, education, and support for Wichita Fire Department fighters and their families, fostering a culture of awareness, prevention, and resilience. As a member of the Wichita City Council, I have had the privilege of helping to be on the ground floor of launching this initiative. Through this, I have learned much about cancer issues facing our Wichita firefighters and firefighters across the state, along with those across the nation. As a personal point of privilege, not in my testimony that was provided, I have had the experience, I've had the Wichita Fire Department at my house 2 times in the last 6 months. Long story, we can talk later. But while those experiences, I realized how quickly they arrived, how well trained they were, and how thankful I was that they were healthy and they were able to help me. On another note, one of the incidents happened early in the morning, and when I came home from work later that evening, I could still smell the soot in my home from their protective equipment. Firefighters face unique hazards when protecting the citizens and the property of our communities and our great state. These toxic gases not only come from the structures and even the chemicals that are used in the protective firefighter gear exposed to firefighters to many carcinogens. The International Association of Firefighters reports cancer is now the leading cause of line-of-duty deaths among United States firefighters, accounting for 66% of those deaths. And firefighters have a 9% higher risk of being diagnosed with cancer and a 14% higher risk of dying from cancer compared to the general population. Our firefighters protect us every day, and I believe it is our duty to protect them. By dedicating funding for firefighter screenings, we can ensure that these brave individuals who run into buildings that we are trying to run out of have access to the life-saving tools they need to detect cancer at its earliest and most treatable stages. Yearly cancer screenings provide early diagnosis for non-systematic firefighters, allowing for the best chance for successful treatment. When cancer care is delayed, the lower the chance of survival, greater problems associated with treatment, and higher cost of care. This can also be an initiative to help recruit firefighters across the state if they know and feel they are protected. On another note, it was asked about volunteer firefighters, and I did want to mention that even though this is a Wichita kind of driven initiative, we understand the impacts that it could have across the state. The city of Wichita offers health benefits for our employees, including our firefighters, but our firefighters get the same insurance premiums that our librarians do. And we know that librarians are important, but their job is different. So with this, we'll have firefighter protection for cities and municipalities that offer health insurance to their firefighters, but then for those who don't, if they're in a volunteer capacity. As we began speaking with various fire groups throughout the state, the following groups have expressed their support for this bill, and I'm going to read you a long list, but I think you'll be impressed. The International Association of Firefighters, the International Association of Firefighters 2nd District, IFF Local Wichita 135, IFF Topeka Local 83, IFF Hutchinson Local 179, IFF Lawrence Local 1596, IFF Olathe Local 2542, IFF Emporia Local 818, IFF Manhattan Local 2275, IFF Hayes Local 2119, IFF Johnson County Local 3559, the Wichita Fire Department, the Kansas Fire Chiefs Association, Office of the Fire Marshal, Kansas State Fire Marshals Association, Kansas Wildland Association, Kansas Board of EMS, Kansas State Relief Association, Kansas State Council for Firefighters, Wichita Firefighters Relief Association, Kansas chapter of the International Association of Arson Investigators, the Olathe Fire Department, and the Kingman Fire Department. And that's just upon our first request. I'm sure that we could solicit more. I fully support House Bill 2024, and I believe that as Kansans, we owe it to our heroes to support them in any way that we can. Thank you for your attention to this critical matter, and I'm happy with my friends to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee will go ahead and take questions at this time. Are there any questions? Representative Awerkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Councilwoman. With your insurance policy for your fire department firefighters, are any of their screenings covered?
Sure.
And
in the city.
Also, how many screenings are there a year that you would anticipate with your firefighters? And what is the cost to your firefighters that are unreimbursed?
Sure, that's a great question. So, and I'm going to ask any of my colleagues to jump in at any time. And we've had a great deal of discussions about this, and that's why we brought in Ascension via Christie, just to make sure that in our Human Resources Department. And so I can't tell you exactly how many screenings they are, but what we find is with cancer screenings, for example, what's recommended from the International Association of Firefighters and other professional organizations that serve firefighters is that the screening levels are different. For example, any woman who's a firefighter should have a mammogram annually upon starting her job. And within the city of Wichita, our human resources benefits that we offer for our employees, a woman is not eligible to have a covered by health insurance mammogram until she's 40. The number one cause of cancer in firefighters is testicular cancer, and that's oftentimes not covered until a man is 40. And so what we have found is that we need to make sure that the firefighters are getting the specialized cancer screenings that they need, but then also not just relying on what's age appropriate by the health insurance benefits that are offered to all of our employees.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to go back to the questions I asked. So I think you answered it. There are some that could be covered, some that are not covered. How many screenings do you think would happen per year, and what would be the cost that is not reimbursed to the firefighters?
I don't have that off the top of my head. Do any of my colleagues have that? If not, may we provide it to you later?
That would actually be very helpful, because by making the claim, this would be a significant help, but there's no data to back that up. It's hard to really put that in perspective.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Committee, are there any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Our next conferee would be Mike Day with the Olathe Fire Department. Welcome to committee.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to be here in front of you today representing the approximately 9,000 firefighters across the state. My name is Mike Day. I'm a fire captain with the Olathe Fire Department, and I'd like to tell you just a little bit about my story and why I am here in support of this important bill, HB 2024, and why I feel this is so important. I started my firefighting career as a freshman in college in 1994. Small volunteer fire department. I wanted to meet people in the community and stay in shape and be involved. And I realized very quickly that this was my calling. And I wanted to becoming a career firefighter in 2000. And through that became a firefighter, a driver, and also a fire investigator. And through fire investigation, as I did that in my full-time career, I realized that not only did I enjoy putting the fires out, but I also enjoyed the science behind figuring out where and why fires happened, being able to have accountability when somebody intentionally set a fire, and also being able to make my community safer. And so in 2016, I was offered an opportunity to become a full-time commissioned fire investigator with the King County Sheriff's Office in Seattle, Washington. And I was going to provide opportunities that I just wasn't going to receive in Johnson County. And so I took the opportunity and I went and became a full-time commissioned law enforcement fire investigator. So doing that, you can see that I've had various different roles, both fire service, being a paramedic, being in law enforcement, provided a lot of excitement, opportunities to serve, but also some challenges that I faced in my career. But little did I know when I went up there, I was going to face my greatest challenge, which was in 2021, late 2020. Let me back up a little bit. I started noticing that I was having some GI changes. And when I initially went to go see my doctor, the doctor said, "You're too young to have cancer." I was 45 years old. The doctor said, "You're too young to have cancer, so it's probably something else." This was late in the year, and after a couple months of symptoms not improving and starting to worsen, I was advocating for myself that I really needed to go and have a colonoscopy. So in January 2021, I had a colonoscopy where I received the diagnosis that I did in fact have cancer. I was 46 years old, and it was diagnosed at stage 2A. And I will credit my survival and standing here in front of you today to having early access to a colonoscopy. As part of my cancer treatment, I went through 3 significant surgeries, 6 weeks of radiation, 5 days a week, 4 months of chemo infusions, And it was one of the more difficult things that I've ever had to go through physically and mentally. But I had the support of the agencies that were there. I had the support of family, and I was able to battle through. And as I was going through my chemotherapy, I had made a conscious decision that once I had won this battle, that I'd be an advocate for other firefighters and fire investigators after I'd completed my battle. So in September, I was actually declared cancer-free. They did the surgery to remove what was little left of the cancer. I was declared in remission, and then in December, because this was a rectal cancer, they had reverted my colostomy back to normal, and I was able to resume normal duties. At that time, I'd reevaluated. My wife and I were from the Midwest. We reevaluated work-life balance and our decision to return home to be with family and back where we felt like we belonged. And so I applied to be with the Olathe Fire Department I'm still within the Fire Operations Division, and it's a pleasure to be here and to know that I work for an agency that supports having good equipment, good training, doing everything they can to be progressive as far as reducing the risk, knowing that we have inherent risks. But even when you address with good equipment and good training, we know that there are additional hazards that we face. I was very fortunate that I had the means to be able to advocate for myself and pay for my treatment. But I know that there's those across the state that may not have that. Or this may also provide an extra incentive to be able to go and get that early screening. Because as I said to you, I feel like the only reason that I'm standing here today was because I did go get that screening, that colonoscopy, and they found it as stage 2A to allow me to get that early treatment and allow for my survival. You'll notice in the written statement that I gave you, I did mention advocating for, in addition to firefighters, non-commissioned fire personnel who conduct fire investigations, and also our law enforcement members who conduct fire investigations as part of their duties. Because when I was in King County, I actually worked for the sheriff's office, but included in the statute, it specifically listed out firefighters and fire investigations and fire investigators. And so my cancer was actually considered to be occupational in nature. So I really appreciate the opportunity to have been able to tell you my story. If there are any questions that I'm able to answer, I'd be happy to, but thank you very much for allowing me to speak to you today.
Thank you for your testimony and congratulations on your diagnosis. You mentioned something about equipment. We'd love to take action to make sure that this doesn't happen in the first place. I understand the assistance with screening and early screening is critical, but do you see deficiencies in either funds available to purchase the appropriate equipment? I mean, what do you see in your experience out there? If we could provide better equipment and better assistance with that, do you think that would have a significant impact on the potential for cancer?
Sure, and I think the way that I'd answer that is, even when we're doing our best, working for an agency that I feel like places this as a high priority of having 2 sets of bunker gear, washing your gear after fires, that as long as we have that increased risk, there's always something more. We can always be striving to do better. There's new forms of respiratory protection. So in terms of thinking about fire investigators, a lot of times when we don't see smoke in the structure, we assume that the hazard is gone. But we know that those buildings are still off-gassing chemicals that cause cancers, and there's new forms of respirators that are the positive pressure. You don't have to wear the SCBA, it's not as cumbersome, but they're more effective than wearing like a filter mask. So we know that there's other things out there. There's studies out there that show that we have those risks. So when you say, are we doing everything we can? I think that we're trying to, but the more we know, we learn better, we do better. And I think that's what we're trying to do, is just continue to stay on top of that. But even when you do everything right, knowing that we have those risks, being that advocate to do those early screenings and then being able to have that reimbursement would be potentially life-saving, I think, to firefighters across our state.
Thank you. Committee, are there any questions? To address the question that Representative Avercamp asked earlier, do you know I imagine every screening is a different cost, but can you give maybe an average ballpark of what the cost of a screening would be?
I don't know that I could even give you a ballpark, because I know what I went through when I went through mine, but I was in the thousands of dollars because of the increased After it was discovered, I knew that I was going to be facing more screenings than somebody who was not at the level of risk that I was.
Right, okay. Seeing no further questions, thank you again for your testimony.
Thank you all very much for the opportunity to be here.
I do not show any other in-person proponents. Is there anyone wishing to appear as a proponent in person before the committee? If not, I would address the committee's attention to other written-only testimony. I do not see any neutral or opponent testimony. Is there anyone else wishing to appear either as neutral or an opponent? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on House Bill 2024, and that does conclude our business for the day. We are adjourned.